Alright guys, well, it's actually the end of the weekend right now, and I'm filming this kind of at the end of the video. This video is going to be kind of a lot of just different stuff mixed together. I filmed a bunch of stuff this weekend, didn't really have what I thought to be a full video for it on a specific topic, so this will maybe be more of like a vlog video of my weekend and just kind of what I was tinkering around stuff. So I did a lot of stuff with the pin measurements on this one, the transmission that I built with the Extreme Automatics trans brake. It was starting to creep through at about 4,000 RPM on the brake, so we made a pin length adjustment to that thing, and now that's working good. Also went to go for a drive. Messed with the direct drum a little bit. So I'm just gonna mash it all into this video. Hopefully you guys like it. If you don't, I warned you. Made a couple of these tools to check the servo travel. One worked, one didn't. So let's just get into it. Alright, so working on this direct drum a little bit, and I know I talked in a couple of videos about how I was going to try to use this aluminum piston. This is the one that's machined too far, and the steels actually spin inside the drum. So I was playing around with that thing to see what kind of combination I could get, and I did a rough measurement, and I thought I had more clearance than I actually ended up with. So I thought maybe I'd be able to get a 7th clutch in, or be able to do 6 clutches with all 90 thousandths steels. So what I ended up doing, just to play around, I used a forward and a direct steel and then welded them together, just like that. And that gave me enough thickness that it didn't spin in the drum. So if I take this out and I go like this, let's put this back in first. And then I put this thing in there. And see, it doesn't spin in the drum now. So that's all good, but the combination that I have here with 6 board clutches, 1 direct and 4 other forward steels comes out to about 62 thousandths clearance in the drum. So it's basically using a forward as a spacer and then a direct steel, 1 other direct steel, and then 4 forward steels and 6 clutches, and that came out to the 32 thousandths. So one, I'm not really gaining anything in the clutch pack because I'm only adding the 1 direct steel. I thought maybe if I could get enough in there and use all direct steels with 6 clutches, that would be a little bit better for heat dissipation and might be worth it. But other than that, the last transmission that I just did with the Extreme Automatics trans brake, we did the aluminum piston that was bought and machined for 6 clutches. And we also got 62 thousandths clearance with just that piston and all forward steels. So I feel like this would work, but I don't feel like it's something I want to take the risk on this transmission. If I can just buy the piston, use all forward steels, and get the same measurements out of it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll save this piston for another build, and maybe we'll try to Frankenstein something together with this one. But for now, I'm going to pass it up. And I ordered a piston, and it'll be here whenever it gets here. So just figured I would cover that because I know I talked about it in a couple videos. But today I'm going to make a reverse servo tool. So I'm going to take this old servo cover. This is from a spare transmission that I have that's kind of turning into a parts transmission. And I'm going to cut the back side of it off, drill a hole here, and weld a nut on. And then I'll be able to use it as a tool to measure a servo travel. So let's get started on that. And I guess I should address it because it was brought up on the other video, a comment about just welding onto the backside of these to add the spacing that you need. I did not like that idea because, well, for a couple reasons. So if you weld onto the backside, you're raising the piston up farther. So the cavity in the back that you need to fill the fluid is going to take more fluid. The piston already has some travel on it, so you're bringing the lip seal closer to the edge of the travel area. And then you are also starting at a position where the springs are already more compressed than they would normally be. So it would technically be harder to apply the piston. So it's probably irrelevant, but those are just kind of the reasons in my head why I didn't really like that idea. So we're just going to get a new piston and forget about this one for now. Just drilled a hole right in the center of it, and I have a stainless M10 by 1.5 nut on there. so there it is. There it is, all welded on. I'll let it cool down and then we can test it. Alright, so I have this servo cover tool on there now. The bolt is loose. And then this flush in the rear. So what I'm going to do is reference this point here. I did measure this little gap over on this section with a feeler gauge, and it's like 5 thousandths or 4 thousandths. It's really tight. This is flush in the back. So what I'll do is I'm going to spin the output shaft. I'm just going to spin it by hand, and it spins nice and free. This is a rollerized output, so it spins real nice. And I'm just going to feel how much resistance it has, and then I'm going to tighten the band until it has resistance. Alright, so there it started to have some resistance, and I can still turn it, but it doesn't turn as easily. And then now what I'll do is I'll measure this gap, and I already did this before, so I kind of know what the measurement is. And I'm just going to take a bunch of these here, and I'm going to stick that in, and
tie string to a tooth, and then tie the string to my tooth, and then pull it down into the basement. Then it would have hit my tooth out.
Alright, so I'm going to take these here. This is a 32, a 30, a 28, and a 26. So that's like 116 thousandths. And this basically falls in here. So it's going to be like around 120, 130 thousandths. I did measure it with a little bit more tension on it, and it came to about 146 thousandths. Where it starts to get tension is about 116, 120. So that's too much. Alright, so this is kind of a crude way to measure this, but it's at 3.336, and measuring from the back here to the tip, and it's a little hard to see, but it is kind of right at the tip. It will go to 3.356 if I go to the center of the pin, but there you can see it's like pretty much right at the end. If I go to the center of the pin, then it's at 3.35, but then the caliper's at an angle. It's actually measuring like a cross distance. So I feel like that one's short. This is the ATSG manual with all of the different pin lengths on it, and the identifier is the 2 thinner rings on it, and the low end of the spec is 3.356 to 3.362. So that one looks like it's about 20 thousandths shorter. I can get it to the 356 if I measure it at an angle, like I said, but it looks like that one is shorter than the book spec. But regardless of what the book says, the transbrake instructions say 50 to 60 thousandths, says 50 thousandths. Jake also has a video on YouTube saying 80 thousandths. So it should be probably somewhere in that 50 to 70 thousandths range. And right now we have 146 thousandths, or 120, so it's about double of what it needs to be. And you got to think too that this pin length and spec in the book is just to get reverse to work. So this isn't for transbrake operation, this isn't for like efficient bump control or anything like that. So you'd want it to be tighter, and you want it to be able to release and apply quickly with very little movement. So that makes sense why it's a lot tighter than what the book says. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some length. I'm going to get this pin travel to probably like 60 thousandths, 70 thousandths. We'll see where that goes. And I'm going to do that with the welder. I'm just going to take the TIG welder and put a couple dabs on the end, and then we'll remeasure it. Alright, so we're having a pin length extravaganza here. So I got 2 pins here, and I just got back from my buddy's house, and this was the pin that was in his transmission. This is the one that we just did the extreme automatics valve body on. And this pin was a little bit too short. So he would get it on the brake and then get up to like 4,000 RPM, and then it would start to creep through a little bit. So what we ended up doing was putting a different stock one in there, and then it worked fine. So this is the pin that he had in there, the 328 to 334. And this is the one that we put in there, 356 to 382. So it's a little bit longer. It's like 30 thousandths longer, and that was enough. So he was able to put it on the brake and get it up to 5,000 RPM, and it didn't push through. He tested it at like 3,500 RPM, 12 pounds of boost, and it was fine. So But now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to set mine, and we were using this pin that has a little bit of weld on it to try to get the measurements on his, and what we were finding was using this tool, we were getting like really inconsistent readings. So we measured it and then added weld onto that pin, and then it actually, the travel ended up longer than when we first measured it. So that should have shortened up the stroke on the pin, but it ended up being longer when we measured it. So what I found is the servo was actually like twisting inside the bore. So like the bottom portion of it was twisting and getting inconsistent measurements. I took it home, and that's also what I'm finding on mine. So I would get it to a point where I felt good about it, and I'd get to a pretty consistent point where the output shaft would stop turning, and then I would measure it again to verify it, and then the tool would tighten up and the output shaft would still turn. So it wasn't consistent each time that I did it, and then I think the thing is just rocking enough in there that it would actually like bind on the case. The bolt here was getting tight, but the output shaft wasn't tightening or dragging at all. So what I think I'm gonna do is modify this tool a little bit. Instead of just the one pin pushing down, you can see I tried to drill out the center of the bolt a little bit just to try to center the pin. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna modify this tool and try to set it up like this. This is just a tail housing bushing, but I might try to mock something up like this where I can actually push down on the piston instead of pushing down on just the center pin. And hopefully that should give me a little bit more stability, and I can push it straight down into the bore. I know there's like a million guys on this planet that are using tools exactly like this. And this is actually the Sonax recommendation to build a tool to check the thing, but it figures that when I do it, it doesn't work right. So I'm just gonna try to do something else. Fantastic luck. Okay, so here's the new tool that I made. I just kind of raised up that top section, and then I used a piece of tubing inside to push equally down on the piston. And then what I'll do is get the backside flush like you normally would, and then I'll check it. So output shaft spins freely, and this is an M10 by 1.5 bolt. So one revolution on the bolt is 1.5 millimeters. That's the thread pitch. So I know 1.5 millimeters is 60 thousandths. So if I go around one time, that's 60 thousandths. 1.5 is 90 thousandths. So I'll do this. So shaft is loose. I'll go 60 thousandths, and then I get to about, I don't know, another quarter turn. So that's probably about 75 thousandths, and now it doesn't turn. Go another half turn. It loosens back up. So check and make sure I'm flush on the bottom. Loose. And then I go one and about a quarter turn. It starts to drag. And then about 1.5 turns. It's pretty tight. I can still get it to turn a little bit, but a little over 1.5 turns. That's pretty tight. So about 90 thousandths, it's completely locked on the drum. 70 thousandths, it starts to drag. So that's pretty good. I'm gonna leave it there. Now I'll put a little bit of tension on it, and then I'll go off about a half a turn, and then the drum starts to loosen up. The shaft loosens up, and then all the way back out, it's back to completely unlocked. So that should be good. All right, and just for reference here, that's about how much travel the piston has before it locks on the drum. So it's not a whole lot of travel. So I'll compare it to the stock servo, and we'll see what the difference is. So that's what the modified distance looks like, and that's what the unmodified travel looks like. So that's with the factory pin, one of the shorter pins, I will say, but that's a lot more travel. And that pin did work on his car with the Extreme Automatics trans brake, but it started to kind of creep through at about 4,000 RPM. So that's a lot of travel. That's why we ended up putting the longer pin in on his. And you can see on this one, like 70 thousandths travel actually does start to lock the band. So you don't really need a whole lot, and that should help a lot with the trans brake, because you want it to apply quick and you want it to release quick and apply quick if you're bumping, so you don't want a whole lot of travel in the piston. So that should really help lock it hard and then be able to release and apply really quickly. Alright, so that should be good with this. That's kind of what the pin looks like. It's just a goober welded onto the end to shorten that pin travel distance. And next I'll be working on the rest of the direct drum. I do have some stuff filmed for the direct drum already, And I did get my other piston in the mail here, so I'll be able to finish the direct drum tomorrow. Let me get a reference point here for you. So look where the check balls are, and you can see how much less material is on this one versus this one. There's quite a bit machined off. This one to the pad was 557, and that one was too short, and the steels would spin inside of it at 557. And the new one here is at 668, 669, and that one's already machined for a 6th clutch. All right, that's it for this one. Next video, I'll do the direct drum. I'm also waiting on an aluminum piston for the forward drum. I got the rest of the stuff to finish up the engine, like the front cover. I have a back cover. I bought a front cover. Got new gaskets and that stuff. So we'll do that, and the next couple of videos we'll work on finishing up the transmission. And if you made it this far in the video, type pancakes in the comments just so I know who watched this far.